This is a full circle moment because we're going to talk all about it. But basically, you've been on both sides of the mic. You've been on both sides of running a business, being part of a team. And so I think it's fascinating to just talk about your journey because many people listening will relate to one part of this or another. So let's start with what are you doing now?
Well, it's so exciting. I've started a business and I never really saw myself saying that ever. I never had all these dreams of being a businesswoman, but one thing kind of led to the next. Opportunities really presented itself. And here I am as a connection strategist and helping other people connect to their audiences. And I feel like there's so much more to go. So I'm excited.
This is gonna be an interesting one for everyone listening because Kelsey is very new in her business, but she's been able to get it up and running quite quickly, I would say, from the point that you really decided this is what I'm gonna do. And a lot of it, I believe, and I'm sure you've seen, has to do with finding your niche and really knowing, like we were saying before we started recording, like what is my zone of genius? Because I've known you for a couple years now, and when we first met, I always think of you as, like, the charismatic salesperson. I feel like you could sell anything and people would buy it.
I agree. Sales is in my blood and it actually comes
Yeah.
from both sides of my family. And I think I was resisting it for a little bit just to realize it was such a steady thread throughout. And I've seen how that's paid dividends in my life, no pun intended, but not just through business endeavors, but also through relationships, right? And not even selling yourself in a gimmicky way, right? Or like a used car salesman way, but really just knowing how to connect with people, build those relationships, build trust. That's really what it's all about when it comes to sales, right? And so I've seen some of those ripples in a few areas of my life, and now I'm really capitalizing on it when it comes to business.
And it's definitely growing much faster, I think, because you found that alignment that makes sense. It's just so, like, to me, I love it because I remember having a conversation with you a while ago, and you're trying to figure out, I want to do this. This is kind of what I'm leaning into, but I'm not sure. And I remember just thinking, like, obviously, obviously, your job is to connect people. That to me is the biggest thing. But I think it's one of those cases where you have to do the work yourself to really figure out what is my strength? What do I see it as? Because all the world can tell you, but you're the one who has to ultimately get there. So, what was some of the aha moments for you where you feel like, okay, I'm on the right track? Keeping in mind, I know that might have been you're in the doing as you're learning too.
Well, my background is ever since I was 16, I was working in restaurants. I did that for about 12 years while I was in college, after college, and things like that. And I actually always overly loved my job. Like servers typically are kind of jaded and have bad attitudes and are kind of just getting the job done. Like I loved my job. It was actually from one of my regulars that I got my next job that allowed me to move to Mexico. And then that actually introduced me into headhunting. And it was super niche what we were doing there. And I really ended up getting mentored in the art of professional matchmaking. And what my boss would always say was, you're selling people to people. It's kind of the hardest sale. It's not a product, it's not a service. It's people, personalities, and a dream. And I remember what I loved so much about that aspect of headhunting was the relationship part and the intuition and being able to be in a space of tech, but also bring so much, feminine energy to it, I guess, when it came to connection and intuition. And it was kind of all of these pieces that led me to realize, I like what I'm doing. I like talking to people. I like recognizing what's going to work or not work when it comes to bringing people or businesses or initiatives together. Learning that those are things that I really liked, but I think I found myself in a position or working for companies or in a role that wasn't always feeling the most aligned. And so there were some changes happening in my work life. And I just felt this really strong intuition that I shouldn't just settle for any position, that there was something out there that was really going to be better for me, and I didn't know what it was just yet, but I was starting to almost reverse engineer my life. How did I want to work? What did I want my days to look like? How did I wanna feel? Who did I wanna be serving? Who did I wanna be talking to every day? What kind of influences did I want? I remember actually speaking to you and telling you, I really wanna do sales and I wanna work for impact-driven people, people that are really making a difference in this world. I think I see myself sitting in that seat really serving people one day, but for now, as I wanna develop more skills and connect with more people, I wanna use my whole bucket of skills to really help the people that are helping people because there's so many people out there that have amazing offers, services, business, probably looking for somebody like me to help take them to the next level.
This is a classic example of creating your own market, which I really love because some people listening, maybe it's you, it is kind of this situation where if you have all these skills and all these passions and they don't fit into a box and they might not fit into what you see is immediately there, and exploring different ways to use that instead of just saying, "Well, I have to do it this way or I have to do that." And I think that's what was really interesting about your journey. I had a guest on the other show on Feel Good Naked talk about how workplace happiness, that her whole argument there for any workplace, even if you're working on your for yourself, is you can be happy in anything you do if you can bring in those elements and really create the environment that you enjoy and using the skills that you really value. Because you're right, like, I was also in the restaurant industry for a couple years, and I did not feel like you did. I hated every day, but I think it was the case of I wasn't bringing these different aspects to it, and what I was doing did not cater to my strengths. So you see it how you can really change your reality when you start thinking about this. And I see how you did that even when you went into headhunting and your job was selling people to people, which is funny because now you're doing the same thing. It's just you're selling one person to thousands.
In relationships. Like, relationships is really the core of what I do. And so it was really validating to understand that and then to really merge all of these worlds together and even give myself permission to give myself the title that I have. And it was funny, I was actually inspired by somebody else I connected with who is like the ultimate connection strategist. And I remember seeing her have that title and I was like, that is it. Like, that's really what it's about. It's not sales, it's not marketing. Yes, it's relationship building. Yes, it's connecting people, but it's really about strategizing around connection and bringing in some of these soft skills, which I like to call soul skills, bringing it into the workplace, giving it a bit more structure, and allowing that to be the core of what I do and for the clients that I serve. And it's not just about the work that I do, but it was really about finding the avatar of the people that I wanted to work with and keeping that vision and knowing when to say no to things and knowing when it was time to say yes, take the leap and jump in and knowing when it was time to kind of go all in with what was really going to feel the most aligned to me. And ever since I've made those moves and with the clients that I'm working with, it's unbelievable how different you can feel when it comes to your work life. I never knew that work could feel like that. And so crafting and finding your own path and even taking some time to get there, I think can be really worthwhile, especially when it's informed by your past experience and the things that you really enjoyed. I think so often we look back at work and it's with a negative feeling, right? Oh, I hated this. I hated this boss. I didn't like that. But pull out those little pieces, right? And then you have to also be courageous to take that leap.
The soul skills, I think, is really the starting point for anything, is recognizing what are those for you. Because from everything you've said, there's also this underlying thing, which is permission to pivot, permission to try something new, permission to go down a path and realize this is not exactly what I wanted, or maybe you thought it was initially. And I know for people listening, it can feel like sometimes that you don't have those feelings you were talking about, that it is difficult for you every day to show up for work, that you don't really enjoy pushing what you're selling, that you don't enjoy even maybe the clients or the customers you have. And that is such a flag to move on, to pause. It doesn't matter how much years, how much time, how much money you've invested in it. That is a sign to to leave it, walk away. And I've had conversations with people who've been in their businesses for a few years and have gotten to that point of, "I just don't enjoy it anymore. It's making me money, but I don't care." And so I think it's really that it really is important what you're saying to allow yourself to figure out what do you wanna do and who do you wanna do it with, and
Mhm.
start to experiment a little bit because it might be totally different from what you thought it was gonna be.
There's a few different experiences that have brought me to where I'm at now. One of them was, taking the leap years ago to move out of my home country of the United States and live in another country. Like, I've taken risks in my life that have prepared me to take a risk when it came to work and what I do professionally. I also, too, had a job in between being a headhunter and what I do now that I took for it was the more financially stable choice. And what I recognized a little bit at the time, but I understand so much more now, I was literally sick the entire time I did that job. Could not get better. I was suffering in my health. I was looking back at pictures like I was frail, I was burning out. I was literally my body was telling me no, 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 no. And I think about how many people actually have those signals, but maybe they aren't able to recognize them, or it's a feeling they felt their whole life and so they don't know any different. They think, "Oh, these are just the feelings associated with work." It doesn't have to feel like that. Like, now I'm working a lot and I'm enjoying it, and the choices I'm making to work are because I want to do that. Like, I want to go to bed early so I can wake up energized to give it to work. When you are living with those forms of alignment, that's energy you get to give back, and not just to your work, but to your relationships, to your life, to your passions, to your hobbies.
From what you said, I mean, there's so many aspects that I think on how you have opened up to what you're doing and to the journey and to what you're creating now. And it makes me always think about how entrepreneurship, it's not a job, it's not even a business, it's a calling. And I always think about it similar to how like art is a calling, right? And there's so many ways that you could be an artist. And if you don't find the way that resonates with you, it's so much harder. So if you're a writer, but you've been painting or vice versa, you can be in that space, but still not feel like you have found your home. And that's where I feel like the experimenting is so important because you can know that you want to be an entrepreneur, but it's the same thing as saying, I want to be an artist. There are so many ways you can express that. It's okay to shut down one to move on to the next. You get the
Mhm.
feelings you're talking about. So you show up and you feel grateful for it and you really love it. But I want to make sure I ask you about this connection piece because I feel like that's certainly what has allowed you to grow like this and to find people that are attracted to what you do and they want you to work with them. What was the first piece of creating this business around connection? What was the first like step towards it, do you think?
That it goes back to when I started my podcast, Greater Connection, about a year and a half ago. And you were my mentor with that. And I'm so grateful I had that experience and that help. I mean, starting the podcast was kind of its first little enterprise for myself. It was the first little thing I ever did for me and started. And while it wasn't a business or with having a business in mind, I had to direct the show like I was the chief officer of everything. But also, something that I really learned while producing the podcast was that I couldn't do it alone. It's why I really leaned on your mentorship too. And what I didn't realize at the time that's helped me a lot on this entrepreneurial journey, that was actually by seeking your mentorship and having that be a huge part of how I got my podcast up and running. That was a really big step in entrepreneurism as well, because I was recognizing what I was good at and recognizing what I needed help with, and being able to be in a place to ask for that support, allow for that support, not only helped me produce a better podcast than I think I could have done on my own, but it also allowed me to see your zone of genius and really learn from you and the ways that you helped me. And that was such a huge inspiration to work side by side with an entrepreneur, but also learn what it's like to really work with people that are passionate about what they do, that are serving others to help do the same. And that's been incredibly informing of how I've formed my business now. I actually just brought somebody onto my business, and it's not just me anymore. And I'm actually working with someone I worked with in the past that I brought on to work with me another time too. And actually, what we're doing now is so much more in both of our zones of genius than what we did even in the past together. It really started with Greater Connection and starting the podcast and speaking with other guests and exploring different aspects of connection really helped me understand how beautifully integrated this part of me is. And it gave me a lot of the confidence to really move into the space, as well as connecting me to amazing people that I'm working with now and just having this be a part of my brand and what people know me as. Like it's served as a funnel without it ever being a funnel, right? And so starting personal projects that are also really true to you might just be the catalyst for what comes next.
This is where I always will admire you so much because you are one of the few people I worked with in starting a show who wasn't an entrepreneur yet. You had your full-time job at that point, but you were creating this little space for yourself to express what you wanted and to really create meaning and to bring out this messaging, which was, how do we help people connect deeper with each other? How do we do this? And I always remember when I asked you why you wanted to start a show, you were saying that you feel like connection is the source of everything, that you know that that's the one area that can really change people's lives. And I love this idea of personal projects because you just never know how they will play in. Even this idea of the person you're working with now, that started as a personal relationship and it's become also a business one. And so we need to let go of this idea of like outcome, outcome, outcome. What's the end result every time? Because then you never go on the journey and you never end up where you ultimately really fit the right space, and you've been so good about doing that. You have so many amazing personal projects. I really am excited to see where your business is in 5 years because I think it's gonna be completely different.
I agree, actually, and I'm excited to even explore that journey, and thank you so much for your kind words and recognition there. You know, I think you speak to a beautiful point so many times where we're money focused, right? And it was the same thing in the restaurant. I worked with people that they're there to make their money, they have this goal and that's it. And they didn't always make the best tips, right? They didn't always walk with the most money. I was a bit of the opposite. It's like, enjoy my time there. I'm stuck there anyway, right? The money's going to come. You never know how much you're going to make in a night. You have a ballpark, but you don't know. So it's like, well, how can we enjoy the ride along the way? And it was through building relationships that I always had a full section and I got some of the best tables and the best customers. I literally got my next boss from them being my regulars at the restaurant. And that became my ticket to move to Mexico and becoming a headhunter and even being mentored in all of those skills. Right. And so when I look at the history of my life, it's been all about building relationships. And even when I think about the things I've cultivated myself, it's the same thing. Like starting my podcast, that was also building a relationship with this project, with my voice, with this whole evolutionary process. And having some patience with that goes a long way and nurturing that connection, right? How can I be more connected to my podcast, to my purpose of the things I'm talking about? How can I build these relationships with my guests so the recordings are actually so much more seamless than interview type conversations? And it's the same thing I'm doing now with my work. And there's amazing people. There's so many people that are out there so good at what they do. They have amazing offers, right? They have their product suite, they have their website and things like that, but they're struggling to connect that to their audience or really speak to their person. When you think about the people that you really love in your life or the things you love to do, it's actually connected to a feeling. And so connection comes down to that feeling. And sometimes those feelings are trust, right? Or approachability or kindness or service or something, and that all of those feelings go into your brand. Like, your brand isn't a logo, it's actually about something that people feel that makes them want to pay a premium essentially for what you have to offer. I think those are the words of Chris Do.
Every single small action towards alignment, towards what you wanna do, towards what you feel called to, towards different people that you feel resonate with and you can't figure out why. Like, maybe you have no idea and it seems so out there, but then it does all kind of grow together. I wanna dive into your expertise here because, I mean, selfishly, we can, so let's talk about, because you mentioned, and I think a lot of people listening are in this boat, I know I've been there before too, where you have a brand or you're creating one, you have a service, or again, you're in the process of creating it. It really does help people, but you're struggling to connect. It's not hitting the market, it's not resonating. What are some of the common patterns or things that you've noticed and that you've helped people with that start to deepen that connection? Because I think a big mistake people make is assuming that big following equals deep connection or equals even necessarily lots of money because it doesn't always. When connection is so much more than that. You know, you can connect with one person who reads your LinkedIn post more than 100 people who scroll by it. But what do you think are the what is shutting us off from our people?
We live in a world, especially if you live in the United States, like marketing is just being flung at you all the time. And so, in many ways, I think we're getting so many messages, so many advertisements. Like, we are tired, we are overstimulated, and it's coming at us so fast and so often that it's just like it loses all of its meaning, right? When I think about all of the roles that I've been in and even the way I like to guide my business now, it's actually quite high touch. It's not just blasting out a ton of emails, posting a ton of things. A lot of it is driven quality over quantity. I think what we understand as connection when it comes to sales and marketing or doing business is actually just marketing and promotion. And so we think that's what it is. But really, so many of the ways to build connection is not about those things. It's not about selling right out of the gate or promoting your product or even standing all of your accomplishments, your status. It's actually just being real with people and being real with yourself and being honest. And what's amazing is I'm supporting a lot of storytellers right now, people that are amazing at helping people tell their story. And part of my job actually is helping them tell their story to their audience and connecting people to their story. And so it's interesting writing copy for storytellers, right, who are amazing at this, but I have found that story connects us through everything, right? And story and being in touch with your story, there's a lot of different components that come to that. The building blocks are connection. The building blocks are self-awareness and, vulnerability. It's about building relationships almost on a friend level, right? How would you start to talk to a friend or a neighbor or someone you just met that you want them to get to know you a little bit or you wanna get to know them? A lot of the times, it's actually listening more, right, as we know. A lot of the times, it's asking different questions. And actually, a lot of about connection is really experimenting too, trying some things, see what catches. We know all of these different formulas. There's the hook, right, and the call to action and things like that, and yes, a lot of these things work, but it's actually more about initiating a feeling and being able to bring somebody in a way that you would invite somebody into your home, right? You're not just gonna bust down someone's door or open the door to anybody, but you're gonna really usher them in, welcome them, talk to them, like, give them some coffee and tea before you really get into it, right? And you'd be surprised how much people really adopt and are comfortable with a bit of a softer approach and not something that's so hard and fast and right out of the gate. And so much about what I do is really about building that quality over time. It's not about how much you post, it's not as much about playing into the algorithm, but how are you letting people know who you are and also connecting to them and the things that they are seeking from you or seeking in their lives in general.
Everything is story, isn't it? That is always what kind of gets me is if you think about when you first meet someone, it's always some connection with a story. Can be a small little anecdote or can be something you have in common, but that's always the way that we've connected and built relationships. And I always think about, when you're reading copy and you said this, there is the hook and there is the call to action, there is the formula. If it doesn't have that feeling and that deep connection, I'll often reread things that I'm posting. And I don't always do this because, sometimes time. And I'll look at it and say, like, would you actually say this to someone? Would you say these words? Would you say it this way? And if you wouldn't, I think that's a really good indication of something's off there because the thing you're doing now, I feel like the role you have now is at such a great time because 5, 10 years ago, people wouldn't necessarily think they needed it. It would be more like, oh, we can use the psychological tricks and the manipulation, etc., to make people buy. But people are smarter now. They're more sophisticated in the market. And it's almost like if you go on a first date for the first time ever, you can be duped. You will fall for crap. You don't know any better. But when you've gone on dates 100,000 times, you start to see and you know. And I think the audience now, most people are not on their first date anymore.
No, we've all been on a lot of dates, me included. Lord have mercy. To all the daters out there, I feel you and I see you and I understand. And you're right, it's not everyone's first rodeo anymore, and I think what is underestimated when it comes to connection, we all have our pillars that we stand on for our business or what we're trying to sell, but people are act there's so many ways that people can actually connect to you, you just have to throw those lines out there, and you have to feel comfortable in doing that, and it's always the things that people don't expect, the stories that they tell that hit the most, right? It's always actually that vulnerable story that you're telling about your mom or something that you're going through at home, or it's talking about the time you got fired or were unemployed that actually gets you more clients. Being comfortable with those different aspects of yourself and sharing them from an authentic place, people really feel that. And, I think another big thing to talk about here too is in this age of AI, like AI is happening all around us. It's beautiful tools that we're able to use to help with our work, but it's adding another layer of disconnection in many ways. And the way we really use these tools, I think, is going to stand the test of time. But what I think is a really amazing opportunity with AI, I mean, we can use ChatGPT, for example. We have so much access to information now that that aspect is easy, but being able to connect those pieces of information to your audience, convey it in a way that's relatable and not coming from a bot and not coming from a copy and paste situation, that's becoming the magic. That's becoming what's actually sustaining for people. And so, in a way, I kind of love that AI is bringing this call back to organic copy, to a human voice, to the actual person behind the screen. What's really beautiful about, the CEOs and the founders that I represent is people are looking for their voices. They are bringing somebody on like me to help build out that voice, but they're the ones that are really speaking. And my job is actually to shine their voice, their message in their most beautiful and unique way to their audience. And in many ways, standing behind your intention there, releasing yourself from the outcome or the impact, it sounds really opposite in business, but it gets you more of the results that you want because it's not so choreographed or manicured or manipulated. It's coming with a strategy in mind, but there's this layer and level and fully authentic thread throughout. And that's what people feel. And that's what they gravitate to. We're all looking for something real right now. And so standing behind that as much as you can, doing the process you need to do with yourself to be able to do that and help your business in that way, I think it only pays dividends.
I think that that is a really good point too, where this is why, honestly, Kelsey, this is why I love podcasts. Like, this is why I love having them because you can tell your story, you're authentic, you can't hide in the same way that we often do behind writing and videos, etc. You're amplifying people's voices, you're helping it connect with others. You're helping them discover too, like, what is my voice really? What am I saying? What's the transformation that I'm doing? And that kind of work is what's gonna make the difference. It's not all these, like, quick hacks and tricks and trends and all this stuff that just clouds our minds and takes all our time.
One, I wanna say that's why I love the podcast world, that's what attracts me so much to it. I've actually listened to all of the clients that I'm working with now on podcasts, and it really helped me understand who they were off of their LinkedIn profile, outside of their email voice, outside of their website, and I think podcasts just offer that beautiful human lens. You really are on a fly on the wall to people's conversations. It allows people a safety to really speak and feel comfortable in a way that they don't always feel, especially if they're on camera or being recorded or doing a presentation. So, for anyone looking to maybe investigate the people that they want to work with, I would say try to find them on a podcast or get them in a setting like that where it can be more disarming because you really will get to know them so well.
For people listening that they wanna connect with you, the connection master, how can they do that? And how can they find your podcast? Because I know season 2 is coming and we are ready for it.
I had a beautiful season 1, and life really called me to attend to it and be with the experiences I was living. I'm bringing so much of that to season 2, and I think it's gonna be incredibly great. So if anybody wants to listen, my podcast is called Greater Connection. You can find it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, really anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. I have my first season there. Season 2 is gonna be coming out this month, so stay tuned. And then if anybody wants to connect with me, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram. You can find me. I'm the only one of my kind. My name is Kelsey Makaiwi.
If you're listening to this and season 2 is not quite out yet, go through season 1. There are so many really interesting conversations, and you have a way of completely disarming people, so they share so much. For really good conversations in the best way, and it is a bit of a unique perspective, so highly recommend that. And thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for always bringing all your energy and for sharing honestly without when you share, you give it your all, you really do, and I respect that so much, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this beautiful platform to speak on this and also being an amazing connector to me in my life and a lot of the people that I'm connected with now. I really appreciate it. And it's so lovely. I can't wait to do this again sometime.